Good afternoon. Let me just start by saying that we just had an opportunity to spend some time with first responders and DPW crews and the folks from the utilities who have all been working with these 6 or 7 communities over the course of the past 24 hours to begin the process of both cleaning up all of the debris that was created by the whole series of bursts and by the tornado. But in addition to that, also starting the process of working feverishly to get power back on in the communities that were most heavily impacted. I think at this point in time, there's somewhere around 32,000 homes that are still without power. It's under my understanding that the utilities will be offering a briefing sometime shortly after this one to update people on the schedule and the plan with respect to that. It's very hard at this point to calculate how much debris and how much damage has been created by this because, first of all, people are very focused on removing debris and very focused on getting roads open and very focused on dealing with the very real issues that residents and businesses have with respect to being able to get back into and out of their property. But in addition to that, there's a general sense among many of them that a lot of the damage that's involved here, they still haven't actually had a chance to get in front of. And the sentiment from several of them, I think, was there's going to be several days before they actually know exactly what the scale and scope of the debris and the damage associated with this is going to be. Obviously, through the folks at the Executive Office of Public Safety and the Mass Emergency Management Agency, we will be coordinating with the county officials and the local officials and with the DOT folks on our side to do everything we can to help with that. But I think in the short term, the 3 big things we're going to need to do is find them more equipment that's able to do some of the work associated with debris removal and then the breaking down of the debris. The second piece is helping them deal with some of the issues associated with all of the debris and the damage that currently exists on private property that's not on public property. And then third, doing whatever we need to do to help with the cleanup process to ensure that the utilities have the ability to get homes and businesses powered back up again, because for many of them, that's in some respects the most immediate concern. I'll just close by saying that as is always the case in these situations, the communities are coordinating with one another. They're coordinating within communities on the work that they need to do to get people back to some degree of normal. And we fully expect that we'll be here on the ground until everything that needs to get done is done. And we'll work with these folks to make sure they collect all the data and the information they need to pursue federal reimbursements and other available resources to help them pay for this. Do any of you want to add anything to what I just said? Okay. So you can ask questions of me or any of these folks.
Any thoughts about bringing in the National Guard? You mentioned about heavy equipment. Is that something that you're looking at? How quickly could that happen?
Do you want to speak to that one?
The National Guard has been involved. They've opened up Camp Edwards for Eversource to have their trucks and to actually stay over. They are mobilized. They're ready to come in. We are waiting to hear from the locals to the Barnstable MAC and then to MEMA. We are not rushing into that terms because there is so much going on right now. Mobilizing has to be done in a strategic way. So the National Guard has always been involved. They're waiting to be told where they need to go and what they need to do. So Executive Office of Public Safety oversees the National Guard, oversees MEMA. Everyone's been involved since that started. MEMA has deployed staff and all of their resources. Department of Fire Services has sent down a mobile command truck with drones that has taken pictures of the disasters and sent them up forward, so we all have an idea of where the critical infrastructure has been damaged, where the roads have been damaged. So all assets from the state are available. We have to do it in a strategic way, not all come in, do it in a way where we're being informed by the locals what is necessary to come in and what is necessary to take out.
You should probably introduce yourself just in case these guys.
Oh, I'm Jean Benincasa Thorpe, the Undersecretary for Homeland Security for the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security.
What kind of information did the drones give you that you probably didn't get from the ground? Once you're able to see the footage, did it surprise you, the type of damage that you were able to see from the perspective?
Yeah, the drones have been excellent for us for visual situational awareness because it's a widespread, and you can drone down on the drones into an area where you won't be able to see it from the street. And you also can't go into some of these areas because of the dangerous lines that are down. So this really gives you big picture, and then you can actually specify the drone to go to an area and localize it to see where it is, what we need to do, and how do we mobilize that, and bringing in the crews to do it. So they've been instrumental.
What has your footage shown you? You know, I know you haven't seen all of it.
No, I
yet,
haven't,
but
no.
What does it suggest? What does it tell you about how big the storm was?
Oh, I mean, you've seen some of these drone pictures as well. I mean, it is the devastation of the trees that are down, the property damage, as well as the lines down. I mean, it really does give you a big picture of, where it came from, the path of it, the destruction of around it. They have debris moved over to towns, moved over to neighborhoods. So it gives you that in a sense where when you sit on a street level and look at it in one dimensional, you don't see all of it. So the drones have been instrumental at bringing the crews in to specific areas that need to get things moved, get the power off, and, open those roads. Yeah.
Actually, could I speak to that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just Christopher Clark, town administrator here in the community. I think that from a public safety standpoint, we have the fire resources and police resources that we need in order to address this initial crisis. The concern that I have is that there's so much debris. We only have limited DPW resources. We have about 8 crews, 5 from the town, 3 from area towns. And what happens is this isn't going to be a 24-hour or 36-hour. This is going to go on, and we need to relieve people and let them go home. And I think having those additional resources come in to backfill is really what's going to be critical to help us get through this.
There's also, remember, there's also hundreds of utility trucks that are out there doing disaster removal as well as a bunch of state trucks as well. But yeah, we need more resources on the ground, and we get that. And we also need to figure out some way to get enough private resources in here that we can deal with some of the issues associated with the debris that's on private property that we're not allowed to take.
Are we certain that everybody is safe from this yesterday, that there's nobody, off somewhere, that might be a house or something that damaged, no casualties or anything like that?
That was the first question I asked, and I guess the way I would answer it would be to say that at this point in time, people do not believe that anybody's dealing with any major injuries, but there are areas that people still haven't gotten to. So until those areas have been cleared and people have had opportunity to get access to them, I hesitate to get beyond just saying from what we know so far, it doesn't appear that there's a significant injury or anything worse associated with this.
What's the process for declaring a disaster?
Well, the biggest issue associated with declaring a disaster is playing within the framework of federal rules around disaster declaration. And I told folks in the meeting that we will pursue any and all avenues that are available to us, but we want to make sure that any declarations we pursue or anything like that we do within the context of the way the feds have established that. And that'll take us a few days to actually collect all the data and the information that's required for that. I mean, the drone data in particular points out that there are areas we still haven't even gotten to yet that may be important to making that particular declaration.
Last question.
Governor, what do you, the weather's supposed to warm up over the next several days.
Yep.
And maybe a while before people get utilities back. There's a lot of tourists down here. What sort of public safety concerns do you have about people staying in these homes that are covered in debris and there's no power at night? Are you concerned about that? And at what point do you have to make a decision about what to do with these thousands of people here that are, as you said, in their homes with no...
Well, one of the biggest issues that we talked about was the fact that if this had happened in April, the population down here would probably be 20% of what it is now. And I think in many ways, one of the primary vehicles for dealing with the question about personal safety is communication with 911. I mean, there's a lot of 911 traffic that's going on right now, and that's open to pretty much everybody. And folks are doing everything they can to respond to any particular inquiry they get through that means. And I think in some ways, that would be one of my biggest messages through the media to everybody who's in any of these areas that have been damaged. And you're talking about 2 square miles, probably, is people need to be... if people have any concerns at all about their safety, they need to be calling 911, or you could use 211 too, couldn't they? And just communicate that stuff to their communities, and people will get to them.
Do you recommend tourists to stay away from this area for the next several weeks? Because they cancel vacations?
If I may, Governor.
Senator?
Julian Sear. I am the state senator who represents the Cape and Islands District. It includes all the towns that have been impacted here. So one of the biggest concerns, that we're facing, in addition to the immediate response, is this is the heart of our tourism season. Most of our communities, we make our lives off of folks coming here and spending time. And so there's a lot of concern around how do we get back open for business. We've had tremendous amount of work in the last 24 hours around getting roads cleared. But we're talking about a specific stretch of the Cape. So we're talking about some areas in Yarmouth, sort of the southern part, sort of Yarmouth through Dennis into Harwich, a little bit into Chatham. First is getting electricity back restored. I think the goal is that that most of that can happen by the weekend. There are certainly going to be parts of this region that are going to need to recover longer than that. Having done a tour with the fire chief this morning, we haven't seen anything like this here since Hurricane Bob in the early 90s. And for some neighborhoods and communities, it's going to require that. Broadly, the Cape is open for business, and most of our communities actually here were not impacted by this. I think if you are someone who has plans, especially in Yarmouth, Dennis, Harwich, or Chatham, you should look at those and reach out and find out about that. But we are really concerned about how do we support the small businesses, particularly with the power outage is probably the biggest concern. If you're a restaurant, you've got a walk-in cooler full of inventory. That's tens of thousands of dollars potentially. And so we're going to be working with the administration and the legislature, both the Speaker and the Senate President. We've already been in communication with and trying to figure out, all right, how do you support these small businesses? But the Cape is very much open for business. We are talking about a relatively limited geographic scope, though the damage in that around 2 square miles is very significant.
Senator, could you spell your name? I want to make sure I get it.
Sure, it's Julian, Julian, and my last name is Cyr.
And ma'am, could you spell your last name too, because I didn't get it before. Just make sure I get your name correctly, your full name and spelling, please.
Oh, sure, it's Benincasa Thorpe, Benincasa Thorpe. And I'd like to address one thing about the public safety. There is a shelter open. They had some folks there yesterday. It's also used as a warming and cooling center. Obviously, it will be cooling today. But it's open for anyone that needs a break from their home, charging center, a space to go. There's electricity. They can stay overnight. There's food, and there's volunteers there.
Do you know how many people stayed over last night?
It's a handful.
Two.
Yeah.
Where is that?
Dennis Yarmouth, it's the Dennis Yarmouth Regional High School, and that's on Station Ave in Yarmouth.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much.
You filed legislation for communities to help resiliency.
Yep.
This is unexpected. Would a bill like what you proposed help in something like this?
Well, the whole point behind that bill we filed was to make it possible for communities to do vulnerability planning, which 71% of the 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts have already done, and then create mitigation plans to deal with it. And then invest in those mitigation plans to create resiliency where it's necessary and where it's needed. I think you get into something like this, and I hesitate without really knowing exactly what the full extent of the damage within those 2 square miles looks like to comment specifically on it. But I will say this. When we met with FEMA, governors met with FEMA when we were all down there in February, they told us that they'd put out $80 billion in disaster recovery in the past 2 years, and that was more than they had put out in the previous 35 years combined. And they basically said that the frequency and severity of storms has changed the game with respect to how they think about disaster recovery generally and what the process around building back to the way it was should be. And they said, maybe we should start thinking about building resiliency to deal with these issues into the way we think about recovery and recovery planning and spending. Our proposal, and the House bill as well, and there are also proposals like this in the Senate, is designed specifically to make it possible for communities to be more resilient when it comes to dealing with storms. And I think in many respects, this is yet another example of why legislation like ours or some other bill like that needs to be part of the state's toolbox with respect to helping communities prepare for and do what they can to limit the damage that's associated with events like this. Yeah.